Amalia versus Leonor. Who has the harder royal future? Imagine being born into a life where your future is already written before you are old enough to understand what the word future means. One day you may have to stand before an entire nation. You may have to represent your country during moments of celebration, tragedy, political change, and uncertainty. Every speech will be analyzed. Every outfit will be discussed. Every mistake could become international news. And even your private life may attract enormous public attention. Now imagine that two young women across Europe are growing up under exactly this kind of pressure. One is Princess Catharina-Amalia of the Netherlands. The other is Princess Leonor of Spain. Both are heirs to their respective thrones. Both are being prepared for lives of extraordinary public responsibility. Both belong to royal families with centuries of history behind them. And both are entering an era where being a modern monarch means much more than wearing a crown. But here is the question. Who has the harder royal future? Amalia or Leonor? First, the answer might seem obvious. Leonor is already receiving intense military training. She is being prepared to become Spain's future head of state. Her public appearances have increased dramatically, and every step she takes is watched closely. But Amalia faces a very different challenge. The Netherlands has its own political culture, expectations, public debates, and relationship with the monarchy. And Amalia has also had to navigate the extraordinary reality of growing up as the future queen under intense security concerns and public scrutiny. So this isn't simply a competition between two princesses. It is a comparison between two futures, two monarchies, two personalities, and two very different definitions of royal duty. And by the end of this video, we will ask the most important question of all. Which future queen carries the heavier burden? Stay with me, because the answer may not be the princess you expect. Two future queens, two different worlds. To understand the pressure facing Amalia and Leonor, we first have to understand the countries they will one day represent. Princess Catharina-Amalia is the heir to the Dutch throne. She is the eldest daughter of King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima. Princess Leonor is the heir to the Spanish throne. She is the eldest daughter of King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia. On paper, their positions look remarkably similar. Both are first in line. Both are future queens. Both were born into constitutional monarchies. Both have younger sisters. And both have spent their childhoods preparing for a role that very few people in the world will ever experience. But the similarities can hide enormous differences. The Netherlands and Spain have different political histories. They have different royal traditions. They have different relationships with their monarchies. And their future queens will inherit different national expectations. For Amalia, becoming queen will mean stepping into a Dutch monarchy that has evolved considerably over the generations. The Dutch royal family often operates within a highly modern European environment. For Leonor, the situation is particularly fascinating. Spain's modern monarchy exists within a country where questions about the institution itself can sometimes generate passionate debate. That means Leonor's future may require something extremely difficult. She will have to represent continuity while also representing change. And that may become one of the defining challenges of her reign. She cannot simply copy previous generations. The public will expect her to understand the Spain of her own time. A younger Spain. A more digitally connected Spain. A Spain where people increasingly expect institutions to explain themselves and remain connected to ordinary citizens. And this is where Leonor's preparation becomes especially important. Because Spain is not preparing her simply to become a celebrity royal. It is preparing her to become the country's future head of state. And that brings us to one of the biggest differences between the two princesses. The military burden. If there is one area where Princess Leonor's preparation immediately stands out, it is her military education. Leonor's military training is not merely symbolic. As Spain's future monarch, she is expected to understand the country's armed forces and eventually serve as their constitutional commander-in-chief. This is a serious responsibility, and that is why her military education has attracted so much attention. Think about what this means. A young woman who could one day become queen is expected to learn discipline, leadership, teamwork, responsibility, and military traditions. She has had to experience a structured environment very different from the glamorous image many people associate with royalty. Early mornings, training, uniforms, strict routines, physical demands, leadership responsibilities, and learning to operate as part of a team. The significance goes beyond photographs of Leonor in uniform. The message is clear. The future Queen of Spain is being trained to understand one of the country's most important institutions from the inside. This gives Leonor a distinctive burden. She cannot simply learn how to give speeches or attend diplomatic receptions. She must understand the responsibilities connected to Spain's constitutional system and national defense. And that could make her future role unusually demanding. But does Amalia face less pressure because her path is different? Not necessarily. Her preparation may not look as militarily intensive, but that doesn't mean the responsibility is smaller. It simply takes a different form. Amalia will also need to understand government, constitutional responsibilities, diplomacy, international relations, economics, society, and the complex role of a monarch in a parliamentary democracy. In other words, Leonor's preparation may look more physically demanding. Amalia's challenge may be less visible. And this is an important distinction. The hardest royal burden isn't always the one that looks hardest on television. The pressure of becoming queen. Now let's talk about something both women understand extremely well. Public attention. Imagine growing up knowing that almost every major stage of your life can become public information. Your birthday, your education, your clothing, your friends, your family relationships, your facial expressions, your body language, even the way you walk into a room. For ordinary young people, growing up means making mistakes privately. For a future queen, mistakes can become headlines. This is especially powerful in the age of social media. A photograph can be shared around the world within minutes. A short video can be removed from its original context and reposted thousands of times. A simple expression can be interpreted as a statement. And a rumor can spread before anyone has had an opportunity to correct it. Both Amalia and Leonor are growing up in this environment. But Leonor's increasing visibility creates a particularly interesting dynamic. As she takes on more official responsibilities, people are naturally beginning to ask, what kind of queen will she become? Will she be traditional, modern, reserved, charismatic, strong, warm? The public is already building an image of the future queen, and once that image becomes established, changing it can be difficult. Amalia faces a similar challenge. As the future Dutch queen, she will also be judged against the image of her parents and previous generations. But there is another complication. Royal popularity can be a double-edged sword. If the public loves you, expectations become higher. If the public doubts you, every decision can receive greater criticism. A future monarch therefore has to learn an extraordinary skill: how to be visible without becoming completely exposed. That balance may define both women's futures. Leonor's unique Spanish burden. Now we come to what may be Leonor's greatest challenge: Spain itself. Spain is a country with a rich but complicated political and institutional history. The monarchy has supporters. It also has critics. That means Leonor's future will not simply depend on her personal popularity. It may depend on whether she can convince different generations and different parts of Spanish society that the monarchy remains relevant. This is an enormous responsibility. Imagine inheriting an institution that existed long before you were born. You didn't create it. You didn't write its history. You didn't make its mistakes. But you will inherit the consequences of all of them. That is the reality facing Leonor. She will eventually have to build her own relationship with the Spanish public. And that means being more than the daughter of King Felipe and Queen Letizia. She will have to become Leonor, the future queen, rather than simply Princess Leonor. Her parents can prepare her. Her advisors can guide her. Her institutions can support her. But eventually she will have to stand alone. And that moment will be one of the most important transitions of her life. The question will no longer be, what kind of daughter did Felipe and Letizia raise? It will become, what kind of monarch will Leonor choose to be? That is a much bigger question. And there is another reason Leonor's future is particularly fascinating. She is a woman entering a role historically dominated by men. Spain has had queens regnant in its history, but Leonor's eventual accession will still represent an important moment for the modern Spanish monarchy. She will inherit a role traditionally associated with male military and political symbolism. Her preparation therefore sends a powerful message. The future head of state is being prepared not because she is a princess, but because she is the heir. Amalia's unique duty. Now let's turn to Amalia. Her future may appear calmer from the outside. But look closer, and the pressure becomes much more complicated. Amalia is expected to eventually succeed her father, King Willem-Alexander. That means she must prepare for a constitutional role where the monarch operates within a democratic system. The Dutch monarch does not govern the country in the way an absolute monarch might. Instead, the position involves constitutional duties, representation, formal responsibilities, national unity, and diplomacy. This requires an unusual personality. A future queen must be prepared to speak publicly while understanding when not to speak. She must represent the country without appearing to compete with elected political leaders. She must remain relevant without becoming politically partisan. And she must serve generations with very different values. This is a difficult balancing act. The future queen has to be present, but not too political. Modern, but not careless with tradition. Approachable, but still aware of the dignity of the institution. And Amalia will eventually have to master this balance. There is also something else that makes her story particularly important. Her generation is growing up in a world where young royals are expected to have more education, more independence, and a stronger understanding of ordinary life than perhaps previous generations. The public doesn't simply want to see a princess wearing beautiful clothes. People want to know, does she understand us? Does she understand young people's concerns? Does she understand economic pressure? Does she understand a rapidly changing world? Does she understand technology? Does she understand the challenges facing Europe? These questions will follow both Amalia and Leonor. Security and the loss of normality. There is one aspect of royal life that is rarely visible in glamorous photographs. Security. For most people, security is something we think about only occasionally. For a high-profile royal heir, it can become part of everyday life. And Amalia has experienced particularly serious security concerns in recent years. This has affected the way she has been able to live and move around publicly. That matters because there is a psychological burden attached to growing up knowing that your position can make you a target. It changes ordinary experiences. Going to university, meeting friends, traveling, going out, even simply being young. The public sees the photographs, but the security reality behind those photographs is usually invisible. And this is one area where comparing Amalia and Leonor becomes difficult. Their circumstances are not identical. Their security arrangements are different. Their countries have different security environments. Their public schedules are different. So we shouldn't turn this into a competition over who has suffered more. Instead, we should recognize that both women have had to sacrifice aspects of ordinary freedom because of their future roles. And that sacrifice can become heavier with age. When you're a child, adults make many decisions for you. When you become an adult, you naturally want more independence. But for a future queen, independence has limits. There will always be protocols. There will always be security considerations. There will always be people watching. That is the hidden cost of the crown. Education. Preparing the mind for the crown. A crown may be made of precious metal, but a successful monarch needs something much more valuable. Knowledge. Both Amalia and Leonor have pursued serious educational paths. And this is important because the modern monarch must understand far more than royal tradition. They need to understand history, politics, economics, international relations, culture, technology, climate challenges, social change, and the institutions that make their countries function. Leonor's education has included international schooling and later military training, giving her exposure to different environments and demanding forms of discipline. Amalia has also pursued higher education and has been developing the academic and practical knowledge necessary for her eventual role. But education isn't simply about collecting qualifications. For a future queen, education teaches something deeper: how to think. Because one day, advisors will offer her different opinions. Government officials will explain difficult situations. Foreign leaders will bring competing interests. The media will offer conflicting narratives. and ordinary citizens will expect her to understand the country she represents. A monarch cannot know everything, but a good monarch must know how to listen, evaluate information, ask questions, and make thoughtful decisions within the constitutional role. That is why the education of Amalia and Leonor matters so much. They aren't simply preparing for exams. They are preparing for decades of responsibility. The role of their parents. Behind every future monarch is a family trying to prepare them for a life almost impossible to fully understand. For Leonor, her parents, King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia, have played an important role in her upbringing and public preparation. Felipe himself knows what it means to be born into a royal future. He was trained for the throne from childhood. He understands the discipline involved. And Queen Letizia brings a different perspective. Before becoming queen, she had a career in journalism. She understands media attention from another angle. She knows how quickly public narratives can change. And that experience may be valuable as Leonor learns to navigate the modern media environment. For Amalia, her parents, King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima, have also faced the challenge of preparing their eldest daughter for the throne. Queen Maxima in particular brings an international background and experience of adapting to life within a royal institution. Her perspective may help Amalia understand the importance of communication, public connection, and representing a diverse modern society. But parents can only prepare their children so far. Eventually, the princesses must develop their own identities. And this is where things become really interesting. Because neither Leonor nor Amalia can simply become a copy of her mother, or her father, or a previous queen. The next generation of monarchs will have to create something new. Who has the greater expectation to be perfect? Now let's ask a difficult question. Who is under greater pressure to be perfect? Leonor or Amalia? The truth is that neither can afford to live entirely like an ordinary celebrity. Their mistakes have institutional consequences. But perfection is impossible. And this is where the human side of their stories becomes important. The public sometimes forgets that future queens are still people. They experience nervousness. They have bad days. They make mistakes. They have changing interests. They grow. And they are learning. The danger is that the more famous a young royal becomes, the more difficult it becomes for them to make ordinary mistakes. Leonor's public role has grown significantly. Amalia's future position has also placed her under intense scrutiny, and social media has made this pressure even stronger. A generation ago, royal images were controlled largely through newspapers, television, and official photographs. Today, the audience is enormous and immediate. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, online forums, fan accounts.
Comment section?
One moment can become thousands of posts. This means both future queens are entering a completely different royal era. They aren't simply inheriting crowns. They are inheriting the internet. And that may prove to be one of their greatest challenges. Leonor's biggest advantage. So, if Leonor has a particularly difficult future, what is her greatest advantage? Preparation. Her military education gives her experience with discipline and responsibility. Her public duties are gradually increasing. Her position as heir gives her a clear constitutional path. And her parents have the experience of serving as Spain's king and queen. Most importantly, she has time. She doesn't need to become a finished monarch today. She has years to learn. Years to make controlled mistakes. Years to understand Spain. Years to develop her own voice. And that may be one of the most valuable things a future monarch can possess. Time. Because the crown isn't something you master overnight. It is a responsibility developed over decades. Amalia's biggest advantage. And what about Amalia? Her greatest advantage may also be her preparation, but in a different form. She is growing up within a monarchy that has developed a highly visible modern identity. She has access to experienced royal figures. She has an international family perspective. And she is being prepared for a constitutional role that requires diplomacy, restraint, and public connection. But Amalia's greatest strength could eventually become something more personal. Her ability to define her own style of queenship. She doesn't have to become Queen Maxima. She doesn't have to become King Willem-Alexander. She will eventually become Queen Amalia. And that distinction matters. The same is true for Leonor. She doesn't have to become Queen Letizia. She doesn't have to become King Felipe. She will eventually have to become Queen Leonor. Conclusion. So, after everything we've discussed, who has the harder royal future? Amalia or Leonor? If we judge by military expectations, Leonor arguably faces the more demanding preparation. She is being trained for a role that includes a direct constitutional relationship with Spain's armed forces. If we judge by the complexity of public expectations surrounding Spain's monarchy, Leonor may also face an especially difficult challenge. But if we judge by personal security concerns and the loss of ordinary freedom, Amalia's experience demonstrates that her burden can be extremely serious as well. And if we judge by the challenge of modern constitutional monarchy, both women face enormous responsibilities. So perhaps the fairest answer is this. Leonor may face the heavier institutional burden, while Amalia faces a different but equally serious personal and public challenge. And that's what makes their stories so fascinating. They are not rivals. They are two young women preparing for two separate crowns, two future queens, two countries, two different royal traditions, and one extraordinary generation. Their futures will not be decided by the crowns they eventually wear. They will be judged by how they carry them. Will they remain connected to their people? Will they adapt to changing societies? Will they protect tradition without becoming trapped by it? Will they find a balance between public duty and private life? And perhaps most importantly, will they be able to remain themselves while carrying a role that demands so much from them? That is the real test. Because being born a princess may be a privilege, but becoming a queen is a responsibility. And for Amalia and Leonor, that responsibility is getting closer every year. So now I want to hear from you. Who do you think has the harder royal future? Princess Amalia of the Netherlands or Princess Leonor of Spain? Is Leonor's military preparation and constitutional responsibility the greater burden? Or do Amalia's security challenges, and the expectations surrounding her future role, make her journey more difficult? Tell me your answer in the comments. And don't just write Amalia or Leonor. Tell me why. Because the most interesting part of the future of royalty isn't the crown itself. It's the person who has to carry it. If you enjoyed this deep comparison, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us for more stories about Europe's future queens, royal families, history, protocol, fashion, and the hidden responsibilities behind the crown. Because the next generation of royalty is already preparing, and their stories are only beginning. Until next time, remember, behind every crown is a human being, and behind every future queen is a story worth watching.